Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. We're presented by Gatorade on this Friday. It is truly great to have you with us. I'm Dave Revson. To say we have an action-packed show would be an understatement. A historic day in college athletics yesterday. We will talk about that coming up in just a little bit with Ross Dellinger. We're going to talk some Ohio State football after an incredible offseason for the Buckeyes. We'll look ahead with Doug Lesmerises. We're going to talk about women's lacrosse, men's lacrosse, Big Ten with teams in the Final Four in both of those sports. But let us start with our big story, and it's been all over the Big Ten Network here these last few days. It is baseball. The field whittled down to 6 in the Big Ten tourney in Omaha. We have 2 more elimination games set for today. Ohio State, Nebraska is going to be the early game. Michigan, Illinois is the nightcap. The winner of the first game gets Indiana tomorrow. The winner of game 2 gets Penn State. Hoosiers and Nittany Lions are both 2-0 so far in the tournament. Scott Pose has been calling these games on the Big Ten Network, and we are really thrilled to have him joining us now from Omaha before he heads over to call game 2 later today. And Scott, let's start, though, with game 1. And Ohio State and Nebraska, we saw these two teams play earlier in the week, and Ohio State absolutely annihilated the Huskers, 15-2. Now, I mean, I know, look, it's baseball and kind of anything can happen on any given day, and you don't want to read too much into one result. But what can we take from that game as we head into a game that they both literally must win today to stay alive?
On any given day, any team in this tournament can win. And it's cliche, I know, but it's true. And Ohio State showed that because they were hitting the ball all over the park. It might not have been high on the exit velocity, but it was effective, and they scored a lot of runs. Bill Mosiello has his team playing very well at the end of the year. He's got 2 great bats in Henry Kazmar and Tyler Petterini, who have done a good job of solidifying their offense. But what it comes down to today, I believe, is going to be for all teams is pitching, because now we're 3 and we're getting to 4 games into this tournament. You're going to have the available arms. And that's really the question mark, I think, for Ohio State. For Nebraska, you got a couple of factors. They have a balanced lineup. And as I looked at flags today, the wind's going to be blowing out to left field. And so the team that can keep the ball down and pitch the best is going to win. And they've got Mason McConaughey, who hasn't thrown yet. He's one of their aces, and he's likely going to go today. I don't have confirmation, but Nebraska has a revenge motive and is sitting pretty well from a pitching perspective. So they have to be the on-paper favorites, but anything could happen.
Oh, they certainly got the good pitching in game 2 for them. Brett Sears came out, their ace, and he was fantastic. So righted the ship. Again, we'll see who's able to move on and take on Indiana. As for game 2, this is a game you're going to be calling here on the Big Ten Network. It features Illinois and Michigan. You talk about the wind blowing out, and that is music to the ears of the Fighting Illini. This is a team, and we talked a lot about this during the course of the year. This is a team that far and away hit the most homers of anyone in the Big Ten. I think what's been really interesting at this point, Scott, is we're 2 games into this now. The Fighting Illini have yet to hit a homer in this tournament, and yet here they stand. They're still alive. They were the number 1 seed. What are you expecting in this matchup today?
Well, they're a number 1 seed for a reason, because they probably have the most powerful lineup in the conference. But a lot of people don't realize that they've had 2 10 a.m. games, and the ball does not fly here at Charles Schwab Park in morning games. And you couple that with college athletes, 10 a.m. games might as well be 5 in the morning. Their body clock's not going, but now they're going to be pushed back when the ball is carrying, and Camden Janik and Westcott and all the big boppers can take their swings. I think Dan Hartleb's got to feel pretty good about that. That said, Michigan has been getting it done and scrapping and clawing through many injuries, and what Tracy Smith has done has been amazing at managing his personnel. They're never an easy game. They've shown it in each game in this tournament. They showed it yesterday, and I think it's going to be the same for today. And Dan Hartleb knows it's not going to be an easy task against a Michigan lineup that believes in themselves. So I think because we have the 2 top seeds in this elimination game, it's probably going to go chalk, but you never know. And because they're there, that means we could be in for a long day on Saturday on those if necessary games, because these teams are getting to play at night, the wind's blowing out, and their lineups can do what they've done all year.
What about Indiana? They get to kind of sit and watch here for the day, as does Penn State. This has been a fairly steady team all year, Indiana. So I understand, the seeding didn't have them as one of the top two teams, but certainly among the favorites coming into this tournament. What have you seen from them here in these first couple games? Again, both victories, and what stands out as they get ready to play for a berth in the finals coming up tomorrow?
Jeff Mercer has the most capable arms and rested arms, and I think that's an advantage. You add that to this, he's got an off day today where he can watch these teams fight themselves out so they get an extra day of rest. Not to mention his lineup. Devin Taylor is one of the better players in the Big Ten in a number of years, and he's delivering for them. He did yesterday. He hit a ball into the wind, into the bullpen. So Indiana is looking pretty formidable right now from where they are. And if you go to the other side, what Mike Gambino has done to Penn State and had that culture shifted around, they're believing in themselves. They feel like they're playing with house money. And they showed it last night with the gritty win. They are a team that is just sitting and waiting, and they can't wait to play. I think if you're them, you want to get back right out there today because they're that kind of team that can ride that momentum. They'll gladly take the day off and rest their bullpen arms because I really think this tournament's going to come down to the team that has the most arms left that can throw strikes is going to come away the winner.
Yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit more about Penn State. I mean, I just think it's an amazing story, right? I mean, it's Gambino's first year. This is not a program that's had a ton of success. It's just the second time they've played in this tournament in the last 10 years, and yet here they are. I mean, they're not just there, but as you say, they are really sitting pretty, having won their first two. How big a surprise is it? A team that kind of was able to eke its way in, had to win its last final games to get in, last few games to get in on that final weekend. What do you make of what Penn State has done?
It's remarkable because 2 weeks to go in the season, they were on the outside looking in. They had to take 2 or 3 from Rutgers, and then they had to sweep Maryland on the road. And sweeps were rare this year, but they went in and did it. And then you could see the belief started to happen. But let me tell you what they've done really well is they played unbelievable defense. Molinaro is a vacuum over at third. And the outfield defense that we saw from Cesare and Kelly last night was as good as you'll see all year. Cesare had an incredible throw to cut Will Rogers down at the plate last night. That was the play of the game. That shifted the momentum, and then the bats could go to work. And that's what I mean is this Penn State team, once they have a little bit of success early in the innings, it just builds. And then they become a tough team to beat because they're riding that hot streak, but they're playing good baseball, and it's fundamentally sound. And that's a credit to Mike Gambino because he knew if the defense came along, they would have a chance. There's never been an issue for them scoring runs, but it's the ability to throw strikes and get some defense. They've gotten it so far, and it's been a fun ride, and they know they would like to see it continue, and I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Well, one more win, Gambino becomes the winningest first-year coach in Penn State history. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit before we let you go, Scott. Who do you think ultimately comes out winning this weekend?
Well, I think Indiana's sitting in the catbird seat right now. I can't put it past Illinois and Nebraska. Nebraska is a very, very balanced team. They essentially have the home field advantage. There's going to be a ton of fans here. But I like where Indiana is sitting because they don't have a loss yet. They have the pitching. Their lineup's hitting very well. They're my pick just on paper, but I know all these teams are very capable, and I wouldn't be surprised to see anybody sneak up and take this title.
Again, an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament on the line this weekend in Omaha. Scott Post, really appreciate you taking the time, especially on a day that you're going to be calling a game. Thanks so much, and we'll be watching here later today.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
A transformative day in college athletics yesterday. The 5 autonomy conferences, what many refer to as the power conferences, a group that, of course, includes the Big Ten, agreed to a settlement in the so-called House case. It's actually 3 consolidated cases. The settlement reportedly includes $2.8 billion in back damages to former athletes. Going forward, it will provide direct payments from schools to athletes, a revenue-sharing model with a capped allotment. You see the statement here concluding with the sentence, quote, "We look forward to working with our various student-athlete leadership groups to write the next chapter of college sports." Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports has done an amazing job covering all of this. He's become one of the go-to guys, and we're really thrilled to have him on to kind of sort it out. Ross, I want to look back first. I feel like that's the easiest part to talk about. So let's kind of understand that. So there is a back settlement. How much money are we talking about, and how far back does it go, and how is it going to be allocated?
Come on, Dave. None of this is easy. Let's be clear. But I'll try to
I
make
said
it as
easiest.
simple as possible. But you're right. The certainly discussing kind of the back concept here is a little more simple than the forward. So yeah, there are basically two parts to the settlement, right? The first part is the back concept, and basically before NIL was implemented, before athletes could earn compensation from their name, image, and likeness, which happened in 2021. The 4 years prior, basically, 2016, 17, 18, 19, parts of 2020, I believe, those athletes that participated in D1 during those years will get, spread out among them, $2.8 billion in damages from the NCAA national office, as well as from the schools. The schools are taking a reduction in NCAA distribution, which comes from the NCAA men's basketball tournament. So $2.8 billion will be spread over 10 years to those athletes. How many athletes? We're not exactly sure. Plaintiffs' attorneys tell me anywhere from 15,000 to 25,000 athletes are in that group, but there's subsets of that group that will get more than other groups. Obviously, Power 5 football and Power 5 men's basketball players will get what is an estimated 90% of that, 85 to 90% of that money. And it'll be, like I said, it'll be spread out over 10 years. So that's kind of the back portion of this situation.
Okay, so now let's look forward. And I mean, unless you're one of the athletes who's getting one of those payments, in which case you're very interested in it, I would say the majority of fans are probably most interested in what this looks like going forward. My understanding is it'll be implemented for the 2025 school year, so not this year, but next year. And the simplest way to understand this, I think, is revenue sharing, right? We're talking about television revenue, we're talking about ticket revenue, sponsorship revenue. How will this money be allocated? Help us understand, like, what the percentage that schools can pay out to these athletes and how it's going to be disseminated.
Yeah, let's start with the formula here that attorneys and conference commissioners and those people in that room that created this settlement came up with. It's basically they're trying to get one figure, and they got it by taking an average of certain Power 5 conference revenue streams. So those streams are media rights, so TV money, sponsorships, and ticket sales. So they took those streams from all the 70 basically Power Conference schools, and they got an average. That average, according to some documents that I got, is around 100 million. But that average is going to change, right? Because athletic department revenues continue to increase and go up. But you just take that figure, around 100 million, in the number they came up with to share with athletes from that figure is 22%. And I can get to why later it's 22%. But 22% of 100 million is pretty easy, right, David? About 21, 22 million.
Even I can do that.
So every year, every school will get basically a salary cap of around 21, 22 million to start. But that number, first of all, we don't know exactly what that number is to start next year, the 2025 academic year. We don't know exactly where it will start, and where it will start, and we don't know exactly how much it will escalate, because it will escalate as athletic department averages rise. As that figure rises, it will also increase. And so basically, to put it simply, around the low 20 millions each school will have to distribute among athletes. They don't have to, right? This is a permissive thing. They're not required to distribute any revenue share. It's a ceiling, not a floor.
So is that it for student athletes? I mean, what about NIL? We've seen these collectives, and they have had a major impact, as anyone who's watching a show like this clearly understands by now. This has been where student athletes have gotten their money here in recent years, is through NIL. What happens to NIL? What happens to the collective? Is that additive on top of this, or does the NIL money go away?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason they agreed to this settlement, I think, is to try to calm the recruiting landscape, which obviously the last 3 years during NIL has developed into somewhat chaotic with booster-led collectives getting together, pooling money, right, and distribute it among athletes. It's very much like unregulated, no contracts, really, no binding contracts at least. And so they're trying to cool all that down a little bit, calm the waters, and bring some stability. And while this settlement doesn't specifically eliminate collectives, booster-led collectives, it does incentivize schools to bring collectives in-house. It also incentivizes athletes not to do deals with boosters outside of the school, not to take money from a collective or boosters outside of a school. And there are a variety of ways it incentivizes that. But, that gets pretty granular, but it's not addressed in a settlement specifically, but it does do some incentives. Now, the second part of this is enforcement, right? The NCAA and college leaders believe that this settlement provides it with a little more teeth, right, to enforce its rules, and specifically enforce its rules on two things: no pay for play and no payments from boosters that aren't true NIL. And that's an incentive. Again, I mentioned those incentives earlier. That's one of the incentives that's built into the settlement is NIL earned by athletes outside of the school needs to be true and real NIL. And they need to show that it is true in real NIL, either the school, the athlete, or in some cases, the booster needs to show that. If not, right, there's a sense that that the courts, given the court order and the settlement, will protect the NCAA and allow it to enforce these rules. Now, I've heard of that before, right? We've heard that the NCAA is going to start enforcing rules on booster collectives and NIL and booster payments for years now. And while here and there we've had some cases, we haven't had a whole lot. So we'll see. It's more of a believe it when you see it type of situation.
Ross, there's so much more to unpack here, and I don't think we're going to be able to get to it all. But last question for you, got about a minute left. I want to ask you about Title IX. How is Title IX impacted here? Is this money, does it have to be distributed equally between men and women within an athletic department? Is there just a feeling that the scholarships have to be equal? Do we have a sense of what the Title IX implications of this agreement are?
No, and it depends on who you talk to, Dave. Title IX lawyers will tell you that the revenue share, say it's 20 million, say a school hits the cap and it's 20 million, the revenue share, 10 million of that will have to go to women athletes at a school. And of course, the issue with that administrators might have, right, is most of the money generated by an athletic department is generated by the football and men's basketball players, right? And that money, around estimated 80 to 90% of an athletic department's revenue, is generated from those two groups. And that money is pumped back into universities, right, to fund Olympic sports that often lose money. So now you're taking that money and then you're going to spread evenly. There's going to be some issues, and it's probably going to be a situation that's going to be settled in court at some point, Dave.
Ross, this is fascinating stuff. We really appreciate you giving us at least a 30,000-foot view of this. I know you have been deeply enmeshed in it for quite some time. Thanks for taking the time out.
Yeah, thanks.
The Ohio State Buckeyes looking to get back to the Big Ten title game this year after missing it 3 straight seasons. There's the schedule for the Bucs. It is a cushy non-conference. Then 2 of their first 3 conference games are on the road, including a huge showdown with Oregon. That is in mid-October. They travel to State College to kick off November, and as always, they end the regular season against Michigan. The game is in Columbus this year, and no one has covered the Bucs through the years quite like Doug Lesmerises. He is now the host of the Kings of the North podcast. He joins us now, and Doug, let's focus in here on the Buckeyes. Big picture, this is a loaded team. They had a ton of guys come back. They cleaned up in the portal. I mean, this is a team that top to bottom feels to me like it might be the most loaded one in college football, but it's certainly on a very short list among the most loaded. So let me ask you this, particularly in light of what happened in Ann Arbor last year, what's happened in Columbus these last few years. Is it national championship or bust for the Buckeyes, or do you feel like is there some sort of a middle ground? Like,
no,
how are Ohio
not.
State
There's
fans
not.
looking at it? Okay.
I don't like the phrase national title or bust.
No one does.
Or bust.
Yes.
To me, it's like, hey, you have all this talent, and let's turn it into a burden. Let's turn it into a negative. Like, instead of being opportunity. But we did this on one of our shows on Kings of the North recently. I went through, like, since 1998, since the BCS, all the natty or bust teams that I could find, and I came up with a whole list of what makes you natty or bust, and Ohio State checks every box. So I don't like the idea of it, but if anybody in modern college football has been natty or bust, they're natty or bust because they have the talent. A lot of it's going to leave after this year. They haven't won a title or beaten Michigan with this collection of guys, and their program has that standard. It's kind of a compliment to be natty or bust. You know, a lot of programs could never be that.
Right.
But I think they're probably beat Michigan or bust more than anything, but natty or bust is not far behind.
The biggest issue last year, the biggest thing that kept them out of the college football playoff, in my opinion, was the offense, right? And particularly the quarterback spot and offensive line. So you have a new offensive coordinator in Chip Kelly, who, as we know, comes with a massive reputation and a massive track record of success. Just give us an idea, X and O-wise, and I know it's maybe hard to ascertain right now, but what do you think is going to be different? Like, what do you think Chip Kelly's going to bring, just from an X's and O perspective? We'll talk about personnel in a minute. That might be different.
So I think the number one thing is it's Ryan Day taking that play calling burden off of his shoulders, but he had to have somebody he had faith in, he had trust in order to do that. And Chip Kelly, his mentor, fits that bill. But specifically X's and O's, I do think you're going to see a little more variety to the run game, both in the style of the run game with the running backs. And obviously they have multiple guys there, and also whether the quarterback is Will Howard, which you presume, but it could be Devin Brown. Both of those guys, I think they're going to work in more quarterback run there. And I think Chip Kelly wants to do that and is willing to do that. So I do think some creativity in the run game is maybe needed here. And I think that's the number one thing you'll see. And you do have to remember, they lost Kevin Wilson 2 off seasons ago when he went to be the head coach at Tulsa. And that was a veteran mind in that offensive meeting room alongside Ryan Day. And then like last year, they have other good assistant coaches, but they didn't really have a guy quite like that. So just to have another super veteran guy who's been around the block, has been a play caller, I think is really valuable for this team. But it'll show up most in the run game.
Well, let's talk about the quarterback position. And you mentioned bringing in Will Howard. I just, to me, I thought Kyle McCord maybe, I don't know if it was unfair criticism. Like the bar was just ridiculously high with the quarterback play that they've had in recent years. You look at that last play against Michigan that ultimately on that final drive kind of snuffed out their chances of winning the Big Ten title, right? The pocket collapses. I mean, there was a lot that happened in that play that didn't have anything to do with Kyle McCord. But this is the position. This is what comes with being the quarterback at Ohio State. You mentioned Devin Brown is going to be back. Obviously, Sayan's a highly touted recruit, but it feels like it's Howard's job, that he's brought in to run this team. What do you think they need to get out of him, given all the other the embarrassment of riches at the skill position? What do you think what do you think they need to get out of him in order to be the team they want to be?
Like that much more than they got out of Kyle McCord. Yeah. Like it really, I think it's a good enough conversation.
Right.
It is not a CJ Stroud conversation. It is not a Justin Fields conversation. It is not a Braxton Miller or Troy Smith conversation, which is odd because especially since Ryan Day got here as the offensive coordinator in 2017, that's what it's been. They've been defined by their quarterback and receiver play. And now here they are, as we said, one of the 2 most talented teams in the country with Georgia, a national title favorite, and they're not defined by that. They're going to be defined by their defense this year. So it just has to be good enough. Make a couple big third down plays. Will Howard's not a huge scrambler, but I think they will use him in the called run game, which I think they want to get back to a little bit more. Kyle McCord showed it in the Notre Dame game, that final drive when they needed it. Again, they were just a little bit short in the Michigan game. But it really, I think bringing Will Howard in was about raising the floor of the quarterback room. It doesn't have to be a ceiling discussion with Ohio State quarterback play this year when it so often is. CJ Stroud's a ceiling discussion. Julian Sand or Air Noland in the future is going to be a ceiling discussion. This just has to be good enough. And it was below the Ohio State standard last year at quarterback, but it still was 3 minutes away from beating the ultimate national champion. So that's how close they were when it wasn't good enough. They just need probably 10 or 15% better quarterback play. And I do think certainly Will Howard's capable of that.
Yeah, you and I are aligned on that. I feel like I've kind of skewed us towards some of the negative, and unfortunately, I do think like that's kind of this narrative that we're talking about is, you know, they have to be, they're judged by this standard, and that standard is national championship, and we've talked about some of the stuff that wasn't at that level. I think we both know the running back room is going to be great. The wide receivers will be great. Let's talk about the defense to finish things up. I mean, Jim Knowles really elevated that unit a year ago. The thing that stood out to me was, you know, they got better from the previous year in his first year. And then the one area where they struggled was the big plays, and they completely eradicated those last year. I mean, it was a national championship level defense. What are you expecting from that group this year, which brings back a ton of talent and then did really well in the portal as well?
There's like 8 guys on this defense probably who could be in NFL OTAs right now, and they're not. We even did like a weird exercise on our Kings of Columbus show where we were talking about the backups of the Ohio State defense, because they have a bunch of third-year guys who are going to be backups who just aren't getting their chance because Denzel Burke and Lathan Ransom and Jordan Hancock all came back in the secondary. And JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and Tyleik Williams came back up front. And to have 9 starters back, Cody Simon at middle linebacker was kind of a half starter last year. So it's sort of like 9.5 starters back. And the one place where a starter isn't back, they added Caleb Downs, who was the best freshman safety in the country last year, maybe arguably the best safety, maybe arguably the best freshman. And now that's who you drop in new. It's like, it's kind of weird how, like, it's the expectations are sky high, right? Like Penn State's going to have a good defense. Iowa's going to have an awesome defense this year. But what they've brought back, it's the NIL era. It's 2 things that brought those guys back: NIL and failure. So if they hadn't lost to Michigan 3 straight years, if they had won a national championship, or if they wouldn't be back because they wouldn't have anything to chase. They would have done it. So they're chasing, and then in this new world where they can give enough to them financially to say you're going to be compensated if you stay. This is a high level of talent. It's probably, I don't know. It might be, I've covered Ohio State for nearly 20 years. I'd probably go back like the 05 defense, A.J. Hawk and Dante Whitner and Bobby Carpenter and guys like that. It might be the best Ohio State defense I've ever seen.
Those are high words of praise. Again, lots of Buckeye talk between now and when the season kicks off, but wanted to get a little in here. And who better than Doug Lesmerises? Thanks so much, Doug. Really appreciate your insights.
Thanks, Dave. Always fun.
Since women's lacrosse became a conference sport in 2015, the Big Ten has had at least one team in the Final Four every season, with Maryland and Northwestern the most frequent semifinalists. The defending national champ Cats are there for the 5th straight year. They're 15th overall. They're in search of their 9th national title. They get things going this afternoon against Florida in North Carolina. Dean Linke covers lacrosse for the Big Ten Network, among many sports. And he joins us now. Dean, great to have you on. Some of the numbers with Northwestern are really staggering. I mean, you look at these first 2 matches they played in the NCAA tournament against pretty good teams in Denver and Penn, and they have outscored them by a combined 26 goals in those 2 games. What has made this Northwestern team so good?
Well, they're the real deal. They won the national championship last year, running off 21 straight after losing their opening game to Syracuse. And I think the biggest thing, Dave, is the only key player they lost was Haley Radigan, and they got replacements from 2 field hockey players in Lindsey Frank and Aaliyah Marshall to fill in the blank. And then the big 4 for Northwestern is just out of this world. You know, Izzy Skane is now the NCAA's all-time leading goal scorer, the Skane train, and reigning Tewaaraton winner. So she's outstanding. Aaron Kuykendall is incredible. Madison Taylor is only a sophomore and plays like a fifth-year senior. And then Dylan Amonte also came back for one more year. I mean, everybody came back, Dave, because they won it last year, their 8th national championship, and I'd say they're their odds-on favorite to win their 9th this weekend in Cary.
Well, you mentioned a lot of the great offensive players. That was the thing that struck me in watching that game against Penn is everyone knows about Izzy Skane, and as you said, she's the all-time leading goal scorer in this sport, but you can't just focus on her. I mean, they had 4 different players score at least 4 goals in that game. I mean, they absolutely overwhelmed the Quakers. So give us a sense of this attack of Northwestern and in what ways it puts teams in a bind.
Well, I mean, you said it. You can't just keep your eye on one player because you've got the 4, and then Lindsey Frank, who is a former field hockey player at Richmond, also has shown the ability to score almost 50 goals this season. So if any team decides they want to face guard Izzy Skane, no problem, because Aaron Kuykendall, who I think might be one of the best players in the country. In fact, she's my pick for the Tewaaraton, and she's not even nominated. That shows you how much power I have, Dave. But I think Danny's the open player. And then Madison Taylor has really kind of been Haley Radigan 2.0, right? Like her ability to score key goals at key moments has been really impressive. And then Dylan Amonte, imagine the pressure of playing for your aunt, the daughter of the former Blackhawks captain, adds a little pressure as well. She has really dealt with that pressure, stepped up and said, hey, when you need me, I'm here. And she's also scored key goals. So you kind of said it even in the question. I mean, you can't just keep your eye on one player. They're so potent. You never know who's going to score. And then when they do score, Dave, I mean, it is rocket fire, lasers. I mean, just brilliant goals from all different points of attack. Beautiful, beautiful attacking team.
They're second in the nation in scoring offense. They're 25th in scoring defense. So, look, the defense is really good. It's not quite at the level of the offense, and it's gone back and forth in the time that Kelly Amani Hiller has been there. But clearly an offensive-oriented team. But give us a sense for the D and how that unit stacks up.
Yeah, I mean, their defense is led by 3 All-Americans. I mean, you've got Kendall Halpern back there. You've got Mahoney back there. You've got Sam White back there. And then I think Jane Hansen has had a breakout year and easily could have been an All-American as well. They get incredible direction from the goalkeeper, and I know we'll talk more about her in just a moment, so I'll save the incredible Molly LaLiberty is outstanding. And then, from the draw circle, between the 2 Smith girls and then Madison Taylor also at the circle, along with White, from the draw, they're really tough to beat. However, all 4 of these teams in the College Cup are fantastic at the draw, and that shouldn't surprise anybody that knows even just a little about lacrosse. I mean, it's kind of won or lost at the draw, but at the draw, Northwestern has always been great. The Smith sisters, outstanding. And, of those 4 I just mentioned, 3 of those are also All-Americans, so they're pretty good.
Give us a little insight into LaLiberty because she is an amazing story.
Yeah, Molly LaLiberty. So 4 years at Tufts University, D3, back-to-back D3 goalkeeper of the year, like every player on Northwestern, also brilliant students, right? And that's why they call it student athlete. She was actually hired by Raytheon and making big bucks, her words, not mine. And the allure of being able to play for Kelly Amonte Hiller and Scott Hiller, and I know we'll talk more about them because that yin and yang is really impressive, drew her away from this big dollar job to come back for not just 1 year, but 2 years, and reinvigorated her love for the sport to the point where she's going to stay involved. She's already got a job now with Cornell in compliance, but said she's going to be keeping an eye on their lacrosse team as well. An amazing story. I mean, she was done with lacrosse. The COVID year kind of changed the way sort of eligibility counts, and she got 2 more years, and she gets better and better. And here's the thing. When she gets fired up early and makes big saves early, especially point-blank saves, and I feel like she's made a million of them, the entire team responds. I mean, she fires up the entire team, the entire bench, the coaching staff, the crowd, everything. So a lot starts from Molly LaLiberty, and that also includes distribution. When she makes a save. Her eyes are wide open already looking down the field for the best pass to start what I call the fastest show on turf. They call the Lake Show. Obviously, they're not on the lake. They'll be in Cary, North Carolina. No lakes around, Dave, but I'm thinking the Lake Show will still be on display in Cary. They might have to build a lake after Northwestern is done.
All right, they are playing a really good team, though, in Florida. Florida lost its first 2 matches of the year. They have not lost since. They beat Maryland really handily, Dean, in the quarterfinal to get to this national semifinal. We know how good Maryland is in the Big Ten. So give us a sense of what Northwestern is up against later today, because it's a really good team.
Well, people do need to realize that Amanda O'Leary with Florida, you're right, a really good team. 20-2 is a pretty good season. In fact, I went ahead and added up the combined records of all 4 teams. They're 71-12, and Florida actually has the best record of all 4 teams. And, you know, it starts with the fact that Amanda O'Leary knows Kelly Amonte really well because she actually coached her at Maryland. So they've got that tie. They played against each other in the former conference before the Northwestern Wildcats went into the Big Ten with some other teams, including Johns Hopkins. So it starts with that familiarity. But just like the Northwestern Wildcats, they've got great attacking players. They're outstanding at the draw. They got a pretty good goalkeeper. They actually got 2 really good goalkeepers, and they're the complete package. They've never, made it to a national championship game, Dave. So they got that extra fire as well to try to get there, whereas Syracuse and Boston College, they've been here before. At least they've been to the national championship game before. Florida trying to do it for the first time.
We'll see whether Northwestern can get the national title. Would be its 9th in the last 19 years. Pretty remarkable stuff. Dean Linke, great to have you on with us. Thanks so much for your time. Really looking forward to seeing these matches and seeing how it all plays out.
Honored to be with you, Dave. Thank you, sir.
Our big stat is brought to you by Gatorade. Maryland into the men's lacrosse Final Four for the 29th time. That ties them with in-state and Big Ten rival Johns Hopkins for the most ever. The Terps 2 wins away from their 5th all-time national title and 2nd in the last 3 years. It's time for our big interview. The Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, Ajax Zappitello, joining us now. He is in Philadelphia where they are preparing for the Saturday semifinals. Let's get into that in just a moment, Ajax. But I want to talk about how Maryland got to this point. We look at the 29 all-time Final Fours, and you say, well, it's not really that big a deal. Maryland makes this all the time. But I would just bring you back to a couple weeks ago. I mean, you guys got annihilated, frankly, by Penn State in the Big Ten tournament. It was your 4th loss in 7 games. I think there were a lot of people, certainly on our network, wondering, hey, can Maryland put it together? Can they make a run here in the NCAA tournament? And you have done just that. You guys have been brilliant. What do you think changed here over the last couple games?
Yeah, I think it was just really the confidence aspect. We got a great group of guys. It's a really talented group and everything like that. And we have all the pieces we need. We've been saying that since the fall. We got all the pieces to the puzzle. It's just when we're going to start putting that puzzle together. I think it definitely took a little bit longer than we expected, but it's all part of the journey. It's part of being on a team sport, everything like that. So, yeah, it's been awesome. We've definitely started clicking the last few games, but obviously looking at the most important game, which is the one right in front of us each week. So just getting back to playing Maryland lacrosse, which I think we've done a great job. And, it all falls back onto our coaching staff. Coach Tillman and the rest of the staff do a great job of just prepping us each and every week.
I want to ask you about one of your teammates, Braden Erks. Such a scary moment in the Big Ten tournament game against Penn State. I mean, carted off on a stretcher. And then you see this game against Duke that got you guys to this point. He comes back, he scores 2 goals. What has it meant to have him back on the field here and at full strength?
Yeah, I mean, anytime a moment like that happens, it's very unexpected. And I think it honestly just puts everything into perspective. We're very lucky to be able to play the game we love, especially on a weekend like this with Memorial Day weekend. Just gives you a greater appreciation for everything that we're allowed to do. He's been awesome for us. He's obviously a great player and the guys love him. So anytime you see one of your teammates go down like that, it's very scary. But he stepped up for us in a really big way. I mean, he's only a sophomore, which just speaks volume to the kind of guy he is. He's not afraid of the big time moment or anything like that. So just super thankful for his health and to have him back out there and that he's able to compete with us again.
Well, you are a senior, and when you look at kind of your progression, I mean, you've gotten steadily better every year in College Park. I mentioned culminating this year, you're the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. How have you felt like your game has developed in your 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, coming to a place like Maryland, you're surrounded by great players every year. You know, as a freshman coming in, I've been able to play with some pretty spectacular players, guys that have gone on to win the Tewaaraton and everything like that. But even just on the defensive end, you know, guys like Brett Makar, Nick Brill, Matt Rahill, all guys that have gone on to do amazing things in College Park, and then long after that, playing in the pros and everything like that. So really for me, just, you know, following those guys, following their footsteps. We say it every year. Those guys have really laid out the blueprint for us. And, you know, it's kind of my duty to now lay out the blueprint for the younger guys. But it's just trusting the process. It's buying into a place like this. Obviously, you know, everyone comes in. They were the alpha dog in their high school and everything like that. But when you come to a place like Maryland, everyone is. And so there's a new pecking order, and you just gotta be all in with everything. And I think I've done a good job of that. You know, it's obviously a big shout out to a lot of the scout guys who have helped me progress every year. You know, guys like Aiden Aiken, Elliot Dubik, you know, could go down the list. They're giving me a great matchup every week so that when it does come game time on Saturday, I'm as ready as I can be and perform at my best. So truly wouldn't be in the spot I am without those guys for, you know, pushing me to my full potential. And then obviously the coaching staff who, you know, it's awesome having a player's coach in Jesse Bernhardt, able to pick his mind whenever I want. And he's been not only an awesome Maryland player, but gone on to do some amazing things playing for Team USA. The accolades go on and on for him. And then obviously Coach Tillman, who knows a thing or two about lacrosse.
Yes, indeed. Tell me about that time you spend with the coaches. You're really noted for your film study. Help people understand what that entails and how that carries forward to a game.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is something I found really early on for me that helps me is just film. I'm watching it. You know, we film all our practices, so being able to go back and see, okay, what I do here that was good, what I do here that wasn't great, and, you know, just kind of critiquing yourself and having an open mind with that, I think is really valuable. And then, you know, when we are in season and we're able to focus on matchups and everything like that, it's really nice for me to be able to meet with Coach Bernhardt and get his perspective and pick his brain on what he notices. You know, like, do guys like to reject picks? You know, what obviously a lot of the tendencies that they have. It's kind of little things, and it only takes like 20 minutes to sit down with them once a week. But, you know, I learn a lot from it, and it just helps me prepare for my matchup when it comes Saturday and everything like that.
I mentioned you guys won the national championship a couple of years ago. You were an integral part of that. You got some ink, as the kids say, after that title. Tell me about your national championship tattoo.
Yeah, I got it right on the left thigh. I think 47 out of 50 guys got it. You know, obviously, like I said in the video, it just kind of to remember what that team was. It was just such a special team to be a part of. Obviously, you know, we accomplished something that we all had a childhood dream of, which is winning a national championship. And, you know, when you're able to do that with 50 of your best friends, I don't know if there's a better feeling in the world. Obviously, we're still chasing that dream, and that's in the past. And we got a new group of awesome guys, the 2024 Terps, which we've been harping on all year. But we're just trying to get back to that weekend, which we have, but take it a step further and win 2 more games and hoist that trophy again, because it is an awesome feeling that a lot of the guys on my team haven't experienced. So just trying to make that impact for those guys. And, you know, I don't think there's a better way to go out in college lacrosse with winning a national championship.
All right, well, let me leave you with this then. The first step in winning that championship is taking on Virginia. This is a team that did beat you guys earlier this year. So give me a sense of what you learned in that game and what you might be able to carry forward to the game tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we go back and watch the film and everything like that. But I think the biggest thing that, you know, kind of talking with the other guys, even the captains, it's we didn't really feel like we gave ourselves a fighting chance that game. That's a really great team with a really lot of great players, and you have to bring your A game when you're playing a team like that, of that caliber. Everybody's playing for their life at this point. It's win or go home. So, obviously that's elevated to an even greater platform. But I think at the end of the day, it's just getting back to playing Maryland lacrosse. I think we've kind of done a great job of that the last few weeks. You look at the Princeton game. I think that's been one of our best games, our full 60 minutes. Obviously, got to keep building, and each week we got to get better and better. But I think at the end of the day, it's just getting back to playing Maryland lacrosse. Obviously, you look at the history when we've done that. The records show for themselves that when we stick true to the process and the blueprint, most of the time we're going to find success with that.
Well, I know there are a lot of Maryland fans, and I would presume a tattoo artist somewhere in College Park hoping you guys do exactly that and win 2 more coming up this weekend, earn another national title. Ajax, congratulations really on a great career and on a remarkable season this year as well. We really look forward to watching you guys tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me on.